Thank you all for being here. If you could take your seats, we could start. My name is Dr. Richard Garassi. I think you all know me. I'm president of Wagner College. I'm a political scientist as well. And I'm just delighted that our speaker is here today. I've heard him speak on several other occasions at Wagner, and you're in for a treat. You really, really are in for a treat. This is an exciting talk. And I know it's a little different than talks he's given in the past, but he's very data-driven, very interesting analytically, both of the data and its implications. So I won't say much more. But I'm happy that you're here. This is part of the Carey Center for Nonpartisan Government Reform, which is an institute here at Wagner, named after the former Governor Carey. And so we do a lot of work nationally and locally with government reform, some of that which you'll hear about as we go forward. But I just want to introduce to you the head of the Carey Center, our distinguished professor of government and education, Seymour Lockwood, and the dean of the Carey Center.
The president has just informed me he'll be here until the end of the program, and when you leave, he will take attendance then. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this very special lecture. We're delighted to have all of you here, and I was told that there is even a representative from the sociology department of Kingsborough Community College, and we're delighted that this representative could make it today. And the college has given her a very warm welcome with 6 fire engines in front of Campus Hall. The Carey Institute for Government Reform is now in its 8th year. It could not have been created without the vision and the determination of President Garassi, as well as the late Governor Carey, who felt that something was wrong, not just dysfunctional, in state government. And they wanted to establish an institute that would look into and try to propose different ideas that could lead to the reforming of state government, not only in New York, but throughout the country, in the 49 other states. So we owe President Garassi a great deal of debt, and Governor Carey, who was alive at the time, for helping create this institute. We also have had through the years monographs published, we've had lectures, we've had books published. There's a new book coming out in a few months, and we also have had some very distinguished people lecturing to the Institute. Now, I must admit that few of them have been as distinguished or prolific as our speaker today, Dr. Joseph Salvo. I don't know if you realize it, Joe, but you are the only person who has been asked to speak here a second time after you did such a great job the first time and in your other work. Now, what does Dr. Salvo do for a living? He said he'd like to be a professor, and not a professor of political science, but he has his doctorate in sociology. Instead, he's one of America's best-known demographers. He's the director of the Population Division of the New York City Department of City Planning. The Population Division serves as the city's in-house demographic consultant, providing expertise for a whole host of applications involving assessment of need, of program planning and targeting, and policy formulation. The division has worked very closely with the U.S. Census Bureau on the execution and evaluation of the 2010 census and the continued development of the American Community Survey. He has served on the Census Bureau Scientific Advisory Committee, on panels at the National Academy of Sciences, on census issues, and is a former president of the American Association of Public Data Users. Dr. Salvo is co-editor of the Encyclopedia of the U.S. Census, which came out last year in 2012. He received his MA and PhD degrees from sociology from Fordham University and is a recipient of the Sloan Public Service Award from the Fund for the City of New York, and a fellow of the American Statistical Association. Enough said by a bystander. Now it's time for the speaker to speak. Thank you very much for being here with us again, Joe.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Despite all of the formality, I want to keep this a bit informal. I'm here to talk to you about, or to draw a picture of the population kind of through the prism of immigration. When I give presentations, I generally give those presentations about all of New York City. And to be honest, I was doing that for tonight. And I got halfway through it and I said, you know, Staten Island's going to be out there. You know, it's not featured because, let's face it, when you go to Brooklyn and you look at the total population, you go to any of the other boroughs, the population just overwhelms Staten Island. The numbers just are overwhelming. And inevitably on any chart that has all 5 boroughs, Staten Island doesn't show up, or it's not treated properly. So what I've decided to do is turn the tables a bit tonight and do something different, which is to kind of feature Staten Island and then look at New York City as kind of a backdrop for the borough that we are all in right now. And to try to give you a perspective more in tune with Staten Island. At the same time, though, talking to you a little bit about New York City and about what's driving New York City. I'm often asked a question about why people leave New York. People say, we live in a safe city. I know people who leave. And it's usually a negative comment. Well, what I'm here to tell you tonight is that it's perfectly acceptable. In fact, it's healthy to have people come and go. If you look at the numbers, the most recent numbers for the city, and the city's population, against the backdrop of the state, this is 2010 to 2012, covering the 27 months between April 2010 and July 12. And you look at the city's population, 8.3 million. What you see here are changes over this period, incremental changes. And they actually are quite large for this period of time. You have a question about that later on. I'll be glad to take it, whether we do actually believe that the city increased its population in 27 months by 2%. Something to be said for that. I'll be glad to respond to a question on that later. But when you look at it, you see this monolith, this big, big hulk of a population. And you get the sense that you just add people onto the top. It's like adding a few people on top of a big building. That's not at all the way it is. And what I'm here to talk to you about, or tell you about, is that there's a dynamic that the city of New York has, that many others, actually other cities have, and that there are many more cities that wish they had this dynamic. And here it is, but I'm presenting it for Staten Island. I could present it for the city of New York overall. These are the components of population change. Demographers love this kind of thing. So I mentioned before that people leave. This net domestic migration is our exchange with the rest of the country. You look at the 50 states, people who come in from the 50 states go out to the 50 states. On average, each year, Staten Island loses a couple of thousand people to the rest of the country. And every year, Staten Island takes in people in its exchange with the rest of the world, producing a net migration, a small net migration loss. And then you have what is called natural increase, which is births and deaths, which each year adds about 2,000 people to the population, which is, when you take these components together, you see that there's a population change in the city. Now, obviously, if I were to look at this for New York City, you would see, on average, in any one year for the 5 boroughs, over 300,000 people change hands. So in other words, you got 60 or 70,000 natural increase. You've got movements of a couple of 100,000 people in either direction. That dynamism is what makes New York a very special place. It's also what makes your friends exhausted when they come here and experience the city and say, you know, I visited you, but I need a vacation when I get home. This dynamic is very, very important because there are places in this country right now that don't have this dynamic and are having serious demographic problems. If you, in your classes or in your work, you take a look at what's going on in some countries of the world, for example, Japan, or in Northern or Central Eastern Europe, or in Buffalo, Cincinnati, Cleveland, St. Louis, Detroit, people are not coming and going. There is no cycling of population. This is what injects a healthy dynamism, what injects energy into our businesses, which is what produces the kind of city that we live in. Now, I always like to show this chart because it gives us a real interesting perspective. These are the top cities in the United States as of 2010. So the list hasn't really changed in 2012. So I decided to go back to 2010 and give you this list. Look at the boroughs of New York. They're all each in and of themselves major cities of the United States. Okay? Brooklyn, fourth largest, Queens, fifth, and you go down the list. Put Staten Island here. It is one of the top 50 cities of the U.S. And each of these places, by itself, constitutes a major population center. Now, the foreign-born, as I call it, driving demographic transitions. There were 1.4 million foreign-born in 1970 in New York City. That number is now over 3 million. 3 million foreign-born. Now, from the previous chart, you probably noticed that the foreign-born are a major city by themselves. 37% of the population of the city is foreign-born. Now let's look at Staten Island. This is something that people never focus on because you're so busy with Queens and Brooklyn, because Queens and Brooklyn have 2/3 of the city's immigrants, and they're huge numbers. But you don't realize that back in 1970, Staten Island was just 9% foreign-born, just 27,000. And look at it today. It's over 100,000. 21% of the borough is now foreign-born. That's not small. That's big. Again, relative to the population of the borough. So, just in case, we go back and we take a look. The population of the borough, 469,000 as of 2010. Slight increase in 2012. It's in that 470,000 range. When you take a look, you see that there's been a huge increase in the foreign-born presence in Staten Island. Now, how does New York City compare to Staten Island? Something that maybe people don't focus on. We talk about New York City's diversity, the 3 million and the country list that's represented. If you do this figure for the nation, you will see over 30% Mexico. Not so in the city, New York. Much more diverse mix, non-Hispanic Caribbean, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Asia. Really interesting mix. Something that people don't focus on. Over 100,000 foreign-born in Staten Island. And look at this. When you take a look at the top source countries, you can't account for even half of the total. This is how mixed the foreign-born are on Staten Island. There's something to be said for this. It means that you do have a whole swath of people from all over the world here. And it's not just the North Shore, as I'll show you in a few minutes. Italy is 9%, aging out though. Okay? I always say that people that start in Bensonhurst, go to Staten Island, and New Jersey, Florida, and heaven. It's true. People age. And the 200,000 Italians in 1970 in New York City. Now the number's around 30,000. But look at this juxtaposed. Mexico, the most recent, and Italy. Been here for a very long time, next to each other. China, the Philippines, Poland, Russia, India, Korea, Colombia, Jamaica, and we haven't hit half the total. That means there's 1 or 2% of all these other groups. Now, why am I showing you this? Because this is called seed immigration. When groups come in, you plant the seed, other groups come in. This is only going to increase. It's going to snowball. It's the way, well, we have to see what the new immigration legislation is going to bring. But most of the new legislation focuses on bringing undocumented immigrants above board through a legalization program. But what I'm saying today is that this is going to continue, and any one of these groups will pop out as being big sources. Now, let's forecast the future. Very easy to do. We go and we look at the race and Hispanic composition of different age groups. This is the future. We're getting to a point where half of the young people on Staten Island are not European white. Okay? The mix of Hispanic, Black, and Asian. The majority of older persons are essentially European white, non-Hispanic white. I'm showing you this because, again, this is a way of looking forward. These are the Asian and Hispanic residents of Staten Island. Now, why am I showing you this? The effects of immigration can be seen in the composition of the Asian and Hispanic populations. I focus on these two groups. And you might be surprised to know that Staten Island is the only borough of New York City that had increases in Hispanic, Black, and Asian populations. The Bronx came close, but essentially the Black population was almost zero, the change, just fractionally above zero. The Asian population, again, pointing to a mix of people that is extremely diverse. The Chinese are about 46% of the city's total Asian population. Not so on Staten Island. The Asian Indian pop, Filipino, Korean. Hispanic pop is half Puerto Rican. Citywide, it's only 32%, 33% Puerto Rican. Why? My theory, suburbanization in the city. Staten Island takes in Puerto Ricans from other boroughs who are looking to suburbanize but not leave the 5 boroughs. And the result is you have a disproportionate Puerto Rican presence. Mexican, again, these are two groups juxtaposed, very interesting. Puerto Ricans are American citizens at birth. Puerto Ricans are native born. Mexicans, the newest arrivals. The concentrations here, if I did this for the North Shore, you can see some pretty spectacular numbers for Mexico. Look, Peru. See, Peru doesn't even factor in Queens the way it does here in terms of percentages. Dominican Republic, Dominican pop, Ecuador, Colombia. You see the mix. Quite a story. Now, let's go with the overall changes before I show you the maps. There was a decline of 5% in the non-Hispanic white population between 2000 and 2010. That is continuing. Hispanic pop, up 51%. 12% for the Black population increase, the only borough of the city to see that. Manhattan lost 13% of its Black population between 2000 and 2010. Half of the absolute Black loss in the city occurred in Brooklyn. The Black pop was down 5% citywide. It's not so in Staten Island. And the Asian pop, 39% increase. Now, part of this is related to the small bases. But we have to stop thinking of small bases when we approach 75 or 80,000 Hispanics in a borough with 470,000 people. Especially when we know that fertility levels in the Hispanic population are substantially higher than with other groups. Now my favorite. Puerto Rican population is up. These are the subgroups of Hispanics. 23%. In the Bronx, the Puerto Rican population is down. In most other boroughs, it's down. But there's migration into the borough from other boroughs in the city of Puerto Ricans. Mexican, up substantially. Dominican, Central American, up. Most of the major groups among Latinos are showing increases. I have to tell you, if there's any one phenomenon that has shown itself in the last like 10 or 15 years, it's the increase in the Chinese population in New York. Every single borough is seeing this. Staten Island, 78% increase. Filipino, up. Asian Indian, up. Unusual, Korea down a bit. Korea has generally increased in the rest of the city, mostly because a lot of the Koreans coming in are young people in non-family households. Now, we have the benefits of immigration, and those are actually quite substantial. You know that 46% of the city's workforce is immigrant. 46%. Think about that. And in some industries, in some occupations, it's as much as 65%. For example, among persons who work in service, the service industry. Now, if you look, New York City, about half the population speaks a language other than English at home. 1/4 of the population is not proficient in English. In Staten Island, okay, we have a bit of a different picture. You see that 32% of the population speaks a language other than English at home, and just 12% of the total has English language proficiency issues. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because you can expect this to change as immigrant groups come in. So nothing is free, so to speak. So we gain the benefits of immigration, and then there are challenges we have to deal with. And one of them is the English language issue. When I show this for New York City, I get questions from people like, okay, how many seats do you think we have for English language training? And somebody would say to me, I'd say to them, 45 or 50,000 seats annually. Okay, how many years is it going to take for everybody to learn English then? Now, from the first chart I showed you, you know that it's not an additive thing, that people come and go on a continuous basis, and depending upon what countries we're drawing from, this will vary, but by and large, we're always going to have the issue of English language training to deal with. We're always going to have the issue of immigrant incorporation. One of the reasons why we make such an effort in the city to accommodate people is because our goal is to help people adapt, to make them part of New York City in every way we can. We call it immigrant integration. The idea that we do not benefit if immigrants are hiding. If you take the New York City subway and the person next to you is ill because they did not go to an emergency room, that's a problem. You do not want to have a lot of people avoiding the healthcare system because they're afraid to surface because they may be undocumented. You want them to get the help. Moreover, you want the kids to go to school. You want them to adapt. You want them ultimately to learn English. Why? Because you want them to become part of the city. Because then they pay taxes. And then they provide services. And their labor force participation benefits us. I guess it's no secret, you probably know this, labor force participation rates among the foreign-born are generally higher than the native-born population. I like this because, again, it shows how mixed Staten Island is. And what's great about this, and the reason why I want to watch Staten Island, is it can go in any direction because you have so many groups here. Will it be the African immigrants providing the magnet? Will it be the South Asian immigrants? Will it be the Mexican immigrants providing that magnet? Spanish is only a third. Citywide, it's 50% of the persons who are LEP, limited English proficient. The 50,000 on Staten Island, look at the mix. Look at the mix citywide. Okay? In the Bronx, this would be 2/3. Each borough kind of has its own character. And again, I point to the possibilities, looking forward to the future. Now, I'm going to show you some citywide maps. This is an eye exam. You don't have to read this. We carved the city up into 195 neighborhoods. We did it for a variety of reasons. But we carved it up so that we can look at the characteristics of individual areas. And of course, we've done this for Staten Island. I'm going to highlight a few points about the city, and then I'm going to go to some maps for the island. This is the change, and let me do this first. The city lost 5% of its black population between 2000 and 2010. And in the red areas, that's where the losses were biggest. Okay? And this is East Elmhurst. This is West Harlem, if you will. This is Speckle. This is Central Harlem. All of this northern part of Manhattan. This is South Corona. This is Crown Heights, part of Bed-Stuy, Prospect Heights, Bushwick, Flatbush. Half the black loss in the city occurred in this corridor. But you'll notice there are some blues. East New York, Canarsie, suburbanization in the city. You go buy the house, you want to buy the house down in Canarsie. Or how about the North Shore of Staten Island? But that's not suburbanization. This is African immigration. Okay? So producing this blue spot here on Staten Island. So why am I showing you this? Because there's been an interesting pattern now. And it's, look at the white map. Oh, wrong. You notice the reds, and now look at the blues. As a result of the recession, we think, in the latter part of the last decade, fewer people left New York, and the numbers from the rest of the country maintained themselves. These blues in these areas, such as Bushwick, Bedford, North Crown Heights, Lower Manhattan, Washington Heights, Harlem, East Harlem, almost up into Inwood, are a product of domestic in-migration of young people in non-family households, living by themselves or with a roommate, with several roommates, coming in from the rest of the country and settling in a lot of these locations. So we've gotten this kind of reversal of a pattern that we've seen for decades. For example, in Bedford, Bedford-Stuyvesant fame, that neighborhood has gone from 5% white to 24% in one decade. Up in North Side and South Side and in Bushwick, we have a lot of younger people, disproportionately white again because of the rest of the country sending people here, mixing in with Mexican immigrants in some interesting ways. You've read about the movement into Central Harlem of young people, into Washington Heights, of course into Lower Manhattan. Those are pretty powerful patterns that we see. So let me just highlight a couple more before I head to the island. You'll notice Staten Island doesn't show up on a lot of these, okay, because they don't have the numbers. So we're going to focus in a minute on it. A couple of other patterns. This is the Asian change. The European whites have aged out. The earlier map that I showed you, all these reds in the periphery, or at least up here in the East Bronx, these are all European whites in the North Shore of Staten Island aging out or migrating out and being replaced by, in the case of Northeast Queens, heavy Asian influx. Chinese, Korean, Asian Indian, in places like Whitestone, Malpa, Douglas Manor, Fresh Meadows, Rego Park, Forest Hills, Sunnyside, Long Island City. Well, Long Island City, again, a lot of young people moving in. Ozone Park. All of these places are seeing an Asian, a substantial Asian influx. But the fastest growing Asian Chinese tracts are Chinese, and they're occurring in Bensonhurst, in this area, swath in southern Brooklyn. Bensonhurst, Bath Beach, portions of Homecrest, Gravesend, Manhattan Beach. You see an Asian influx that is substantial. This is Sunset Park, one of the three Chinatowns, if you will. This is Flushing. Okay? Notice the red here, that's Chinatown. Declines in the Asian population. Okay, so the biggest growth now we're seeing in the Asian population is out here. I'll talk about New Springville in a minute. Okay, Hispanic. The Hispanic population now in the city is huge, and it's getting bigger. This swath here, in Greenpoint, Williamsburg, down into what we would call downtown Brooklyn, western Brooklyn, there was a lot of new construction in here. And the Hispanics, or in this case, a disproportionate number of Puerto Ricans moved out. And we think that a chunk of it has gone here, which is Ridgewood on the Queens-Brooklyn border. Ridgewood and Glendale have taken in quite a number of Hispanics. Hispanics in southern Brooklyn. The vacuum created down here by the exiting of the Italians has made for opportunities for Hispanics, Asians, and also for the Russian population. And you see the East Bronx, the whole East Bronx, taking in large numbers of Hispanics, and the North Shore. Let me focus a little on Staten Island. Okay, these are the neighborhoods, designations, controversial as they are. Whenever we put a label on any piece of turf, we get in trouble. It doesn't matter what we do. we try to label, give labels to different turf here. Okay, this is the overall percent change in population. You'll notice Staten Island grew in the last decade, the North Shore grew, the South Shore grew, especially substantially. If you have questions about what we think is happening here, I'll be glad to try to answer them, but I have to tell you we're trying to figure it out. Of course, this is New Dorp, hit hard by Sandy, and we're in the process of trying to figure out what New Dorp and Oakwood Beach, what we think will happen there. The white population. This cannot surprise us, the declines on the North Shore, because a lot of it is the aging out of people. What surprised us a bit was Mid-Island, to see declines. Part of this has to do with the waning, believe it or not, of the Russian population. The Russian pop that comes out of southern Brooklyn's coming here, but it's slowing. And also this has to do with a push down into here, down into Tottenville, into Community District 3. This Mid-Island population pushing down into the southern part of the island. But again, most of this, not surprising, again, it's aging of the population, aging out. Black population shows increases in the portions of the North Shore, New Springville. What we're trying to figure out is how much of this is African American, and we don't suspect that it is that much. We think it's African immigration. Okay? The West Bronx and the North Shore of Staten Island are unique in their capacity to draw immigrants directly from African nations. The Asian population. Wow, holy cow. The Asian population is increasing substantially in most parts of the island. And a lot of it is Chinese, okay? The Korean presence, for example, though, is still there. I know I showed you the chart before, but like Heartland Village still has a pretty substantial Korean population, and I trust it will continue for quite a while. But new Asian immigrants coming in. Also, you have to keep in mind, when we talk about Asian, we're talking about South Asian too. We're talking about Bangladesh, talking about India, of course, Bangladesh, and perhaps even small numbers from Pakistan, okay? And settling in, again, most heavily in this portion of the North Shore. I don't know what to say, except that the Hispanic influx to Staten Island has been huge. And it has to do with the fact that there are, and again, it's varied. It's not one group. You see the Puerto Rican influx, which I call suburbanization in the city, but you see South America represented here. You see, well, what we read about mostly is about the issues that involve occupancy on the North Shore of Mexican immigrants. We've all read that, and about the tensions that have occurred up in here. For example, in Port Richmond, portions of Mariners Harbor. Okay, what you don't hear about is the large working class and middle class population of Hispanics moving to the island, some of whom want to experience home ownership, some of whom want less density. There are a variety of reasons. Some of this is suburbanization in the city, but it is substantial, and these numbers are not small. we have, I failed to mention this earlier, you have to have at least 1,000 persons in the group in both periods of time to make the map, okay? If you have less than 1,000 Hispanics in either 2000 or 2010, you don't make the map. And you can see there's virtually every single place on the islands is experiencing a pretty big Hispanic influx. Now, just some points about the future. I showed this chart again. You saw it before. The young people. These young people will age. And as these young people age, the composition of the island is going to shift. Okay? And there'll become a point when Staten Island will become minority, I hate that phrase. It'll become a mix of people where perhaps all these wonderful classifications that demographers love and sociologists like, well, no, sociologists actually don't like them. I don't like these categories. I don't like them a bit. The fact of the matter is that they give us a method to go about examining the population, but you have to be careful because within the black population, as I mentioned before, what's driving it is African immigration. Completely different, from the experience that you would have of Caribbean or of the African American pop with origins in the South. It's like when you talk about Asian, oh my God, when you talk about Hispanic, you talk about getting into trouble. These are our projections that we had for the boroughs of the city that we published in 2008. We are working on new projections right now, rather intensively. We have a projected population of 9.1 million in 2030. We project Staten Island's pop at 552,000. Right now, it's around 470-something thousand. We're working on revising these projections. The numbers for Staten Island will probably not be as high in our next set of projections as they are now. I can't tell you where they will be, but they will probably not be as high. Why is that the case? When we did these projections, the city was producing 30,000 housing units every year. Immigration was at substantial levels. We did not have the onset of the deep recession yet. We have now experienced a serious recession, deep recession. We have now experienced, excuse me, a big slowdown in the production of housing units. As you might expect, you can't keep building housing units. It has to slow down. And finally, if you take a look at data from the American Community Survey for the current time point, and you look at it for 2000, you will discover that there is actually a 30% decline in recent immigration. Immigration is actually down. Okay. So if you use those modified assumptions, the odds are the numbers are going to be lower. And the same will be the case. It will be the case, perhaps for Staten Island. We don't know yet. Like we're continuing to work on this. But rest assured that this will be true. In demography, age structure is very powerful. If you know the age structure of a population at one point in time, generally speaking, you can tell a lot about what the age structure is going to be going forward. So I cannot tell you what the population is going to be in 2030. Well, I can guess, but I can't tell you. I don't have a crystal ball. I always tell people you can come after me and let me know if I missed. Hopefully I'll be able to answer. But I do know this, that we're going to age. We're going to age substantially. And for example, the original projection we did has Staten Island going from 12% 65 and over to almost 19%. It will be, in that sense, have the oldest age structure of the 5 boroughs. The Bronx will have the youngest age structure. That is probably going to happen. New York City will go from 12 to 15% 65 and over. These are big numbers. 300,000 or 400,000 more people 65 and over. That's the way it looks. And even with our new round of projections, we don't expect this to change all that much. So we need to prepare for this. Now, my last point, how do you prepare for this? There's a concept in demography referred to as dependency, which is the relationship between the number of persons in the working ages and the number of people who are in the older ages. Okay? One group relies on the other. Okay? The delivery of services really hinges upon your ability to provide the dollars and the resources to support a budget capable of providing services to 300,000 or 400,000 more persons over the age of 65. When you look at New York, we get an injection of people in their 20s and 30s who come here, primary reason to work, are immigrants. They come here to work, first and foremost. And we see it in the labor force participation rates. So we then have an increasing elderly group. I should never use the word elderly. Jeez. As I get older,
Wiser.
Wiser. Yes. Wiser. Thank you. The population 65 and over, as it gets larger, that dependency ratio, it could swell. In other words, the number of dependent persons per working age persons can really increase. If you want to see what that does, go and look. The Economist, on a regular basis, magazine publishes articles on Japan and Northern and Central Europe. Their age distributions are out of whack. And what's happening is that they're going through this period where they can't support municipal budgets, where the municipal budgets that they develop are just not plausible because of this demographic problem. It is occurring in some of our cities in the Midwest right now that don't get an injection of young people. The young people grow up there and they leave, and people age, their parents age in place. That is you're headed for a demographic problem, a demographic imbalance that can really have a bad, bad impact. So I want to leave you with this thought. The curse, the demographic curse, is not people leaving, okay? It's the absence of a dynamic. It's stagnation. Any form of stagnation for a vital city. By definition, a city is a place that is vital. People come and go. People leave for a whole bunch of reasons. You know, they want a bigger house, they want to get another job, but they're better for having been here. And the new people come in, see that, and we act as a magnet, and you get that turnover and that injection of energy. If that doesn't happen, you're no longer a city. If that doesn't happen, you're a place on a map without any vitality. And that's the curse. That's the thing you always have to watch out for. What I'm suggesting to you today is that on its own, Staten Island has this, or at least some of this, and has perhaps the ability to develop into something that might cause a lot of people to pay attention going forward, because the seeds have been planted, so to speak, and the movement forward is, I think, well on track for something that could be quite formidable from the standpoint of this dependency issue, perhaps with an increase in immigration, having that percent foreign born may not rise as much. Perhaps groups coming in who have a proclivity to start business, more businesses. There's a whole bunch of things that can happen. But the good news is that you do have, this kind of mix of people and this mix of this dynamic that I referred to. So I'm going to stop now, and I hope you have questions. Now, I have to leave shortly after 6, so I'm going to do this. I never do this. It's kind of dangerous. This is our website. We moved up in the world, nyc.gov/population. If you just type in population, you get our homepage now. And we have a neat tool called New York City Census Fact Finder, which is really cool. And you can design your own study area and come up with all kinds of statistics. And then, of course, there's the Census Bureau's website. So now, here's the thing. For those of you who are students, if you have questions or issues you want to raise, and I'd be happy to take questions from your professors, okay? And I won't give my email address just yet. No, I'm not going to do that. But I would be happy to respond to inquiries from your teachers, okay? Because if I could open an adjunct department in my office if I wanted to. If I gave out I would be crazy. So I don't want to do that. But I do want to extend that invitation to you. And secondly, I thank you all for being here. It's really heartwarming, especially given the fact that a lot of you can't even sit down, and appreciate that very much, or manage to do that. But thank you for listening.
I'll jump in first while you all think of a question, okay? So what are the political implications of those migratory patterns in terms of going forward? How does that impact the city in some way, shape, or form?
The political implications. Well, it means that to survive, a politician is going to have to develop, even though neighborhoods, you know, we've got these enclaves all over the place. Given the number of persons that are in a council district, a state senate district, assembly district, congressional district, they are going to have to build coalitions in ways that right now we can't even imagine. They're going to have to network with different groups of people in all kinds of creative ways. And it's a great thing because it's a real test of the mettle of a politician, right? You want a politician to be able to do that. Oh God, I want to say this on camera, but right now the problem in the country is we have these enclaves that, you know, because of gerrymandering, we have these places in the country where people can ignore the entire population of the United States because they have this one kind of, you know, group of people that they are responsible to, and then they ignore everything else. That will not happen in the city of New York going forward. It can't happen because we have so many people. When you talk about a district with 600,000-700,000 people, or even 300,000 or 200,000, you have such a blend of people that you're going to have to reach across. And that is really healthy.
Thank you.
I know it's not featured that much, but I was wondering, what part of Africa the majority of like the popular immigrants from Africa are coming from in Staten Island?
Okay. You know that the Bronx has the largest African community right now in Highbridge, and that is most heavily from Ghana. Ghana, Gambia. Staten Island, though, is Nigeria. For example, we're seeing in that corridor up in Mariners Harbor, we're seeing Nigeria, Sierra Leone. We're seeing, oh, somebody help me.
Liberia.
Liberia. Liberia. Those are the big groups. No, there's another one that I forgot. It's the Cape Verdeans that we're seeing. But I can actually have a list that I can
compile. But this is all from the west of Africa?
Essentially. Most heavily. So.
I want to say thank you. This is great. It's just the numbers are astounding. But I have two sort of brief questions. One is that when you explain that when you see Hispanic or Latino migration into Staten Island, I want to believe you, and I want to say that yes, it's suburbanization.
No, some of it is.
Some of it is. An alternative hypothesis comes to mind. Could it be rents? Could it be just like rents in Washington Heights, or if you want to call it the Dominican Republic? I'm happy to call it the DR. But is it rents in Manhattan? Is that just one explanation for it? And
yeah, but you would have to explain, there are parts of the other boroughs where rents are not anywhere near Western Brooklyn or Manhattan levels.
right.
And the movement, right now, you know, Dominicans, actually the Dominican population is showing net out migration now. And the Dominican population is consolidated in the Bronx. It used to be the Bronx and Washington and Manhattan were equal, not anymore. The Bronx has far more Dominicans now than Washington Heights. So the answer is, I don't really know, but the idea of somebody moving to Staten Island because of having a rental, yeah, I wouldn't really agree with that, because there are enough alternatives for people who can live outside of Manhattan and Western Brooklyn. You know, like for example in Eastern Queens. Right. And the second?
Briefly, the Times had an article a couple of years ago, I want to say maybe 3 years ago, that said that black Americans leaving New York end up often going to Atlanta, that there is a movement back down south, and because, and there is a reverse white flight.
Okay, it's been happening for 3 decades.
Right.
It's not new. What is new is this. You got the black population, okay? The outmigration of African Americans with origin in the South has been occurring since the 80s, okay? The 80s picked up in the 90s and last decade. What happened, though, was the West Indian immigration compensated for that. So you didn't get an overall loss in black population. Now what's happened is the West Indian pop is moving out, and the African American pop with origins in the South is moving out, and the new African immigrants are not large enough to make up for that loss, and now we have a loss in black population.
I have a question. What is it that attracts the immigrants to come to New York? Is it the jobs that are bringing them here, and why Staten Island seems to be why is it Staten Island seems to attract so many immigrants?
I was hoping you'd help me with that second question. I can tell you this. It's to work. People ask me a question, why don't they go to Philadelphia? Why don't they go to some other places in the region? It's the mix of jobs. We have several million jobs that are in and around the city in very diverse industries and occupations. So if you come here, you have a choice. There are a lot of things you can do here. That is the biggest reason. Most immigrants come here to work. Okay, that's a bottom line. Now, Staten Island historically has gotten immigrants from through the other boroughs. But you know, if you look back at Staten Island history, Staten Island always had a direct attraction for a lot of groups, actually. Okay, I was reading the history of Sandy Ground. Did I get it right?
Yeah.
So I was reading the history and the Black Indian movement there, 2 centuries ago. And I was reading about the North Shore of the island. So there's always been an attraction. The question is, in this modern era, what is the attraction? There is enough development on the North Shore and enough diversity of businesses and things to do that has attracted the Mexican immigrants, for example, in service, labor jobs, and a number of other groups in sufficient numbers so that you get what we would call the seed immigration or the beachhead immigration. The big question now is, what will happen as you go to Mid-Island, to the Mid-Island, development of Mid-Island in terms of businesses and potential attraction for new immigrants? And the answer is I don't know. If the rest of the island maintains its totally suburban character, you may not have it. But the mix of people who are here, it doesn't mean that you come here primarily to work. It could be that immigrants are also pursuing less density for some reason and coming through the other boroughs, for example. All right, and as a result, ending up in Mid-Island in areas that would be more suburban. Again, with Sandy, I don't know what effects it's going to have on any of this. There may be all kinds of unintended effects. There may be jobs that get generated as a result of what happened that may bring in people. We just don't know yet. All right. Yeah.
You said earlier that the Asian population will increase to 12 to 19%. My question is somewhat economic, but I figured you probably looked into that. How do you think that's going to affect our generation in terms of Social Security benefits? Or is that something you've thought about?
Well, I have to tell you, first of all, I don't want to make any judgments about, I am a baby boomer, and I'm very happy about immigration. And one of the reasons I'm very happy about immigration is I'm hoping as I get older, the supports that I will need will be there, and you need a vital economy for that. If you don't have a vital economy, then you can't do anything. Budgets, budget problems develop, and there's all kinds of service cutbacks. So the answer is we should be grateful that we have this injection of younger people in the working ages coming here, and it is the vitality of those people that will see us through this next demographic transition in the city. And if you doubt it, go and look at other places that don't have it, and look at what has happened. All your young people leave. To tell you the truth, how many of you live in Nassau County? Just curious. See, generally speaking, Westchester? No, I don't think so. Generally speaking, young people leave Westchester and leave Nassau. Okay, so what do we have as a result? We have record out commuting every day into those two counties because they don't have the labor to support services right in their own county. So they're getting it from New York City. But what's happening is those counties, because of a variety of housing policies and zoning issues and so on, are not supporting, perhaps, the way they need to the immigrant populations. And as a result, what do you think is going to happen to taxation? Okay, if you don't have the economy to generate the dollars, you go to taxes, and it creates a problem. Yeah.
Joe, in follow-up to the political question, I live in a neighborhood called Bensonhurst, which has had an increase in both Chinese immigrants and Russian immigrants coming in. But there was also a difference in the percentage that each group has who actually vote on election day. Do you have, because the election of people is the ultimate power, not necessarily the population of the people, but those who go to vote. Do you have information relating to which new ethnic Americans actually go to vote and which don't go to vote once they become citizens?
We don't have data on the voting population, but up on our website we have for council districts, because we don't do state assembly, state senate, but we have for council districts the race and Hispanic distribution of the pop under 18, total pop under 18 and 18 and over, precisely for the reason you state. You go into some areas and you look at the dominant population and you realize they're not controlling the political process. They're not involved in the political process. It's a subgroup of people who participate and who, frankly, have a lot of citizens. Let me give you one quick example. I gave a presentation to the Dominican leadership, okay, national Dominican leadership, and I showed them the numbers for New York. It turns out of the total Dominican population of New York City, which is like 579,000 people, something like 35 or maybe 40% are actually voting age citizens. 60% of the population is either too young or is not a non-citizen. So I said to them, you better get out there and make sure, A, that whoever's eligible to become a citizen becomes a citizen, and B, as those children come through the school, move through school and become a voting age, that you explain to them that it's important to vote. That is a great example of why some groups could be in very large numbers, but they don't ever get the political clout that you would expect them to get.
Two questions. One was the biracial sort of future, young people who are half Hispanic, half Italian, and so on. Where do you think that's going to go, and are you going to keep track of that? Do you keep track of intermarriage, that sort of question? And then the second question I wanted to ask is if you had a theory why Staten Island has so many fewer people than the other boroughs, and if that will ever change.
Staten Island's density, its housing, of course, it's not going to have, it doesn't have the zoning, it doesn't have the density or that the other boroughs have. Excuse me. But the other thing is the multiracial question on the census has been a really tough thing. People answer in all kinds of ways. Instead of chronicling the increase in multiracial people, it's done a poor job doing that. The primary examples are the big groups are white and other, black and other, Asian and other, and then people write in all kinds of stuff. And it's very difficult to identify specific combinations of groups. It's because it's the way people answer the census questionnaire. It's rather difficult. And there's a lot of confusion. Italian Americans want to answer Italian, and they write it in, and there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. But white and other, sometimes unspecified, black and other, unspecified, so you can't really tell what you have. The only exception to this is white and Asian in two places in the city, in Flushing, big numbers, and the other place is Richmond Hill, Queens, Guyanese. The Guyanese population will check Asian Indian, will check other, and write in Guyana, the Guyanese. And it produces a multiracial combination that shows up to 14 or 15% of some neighborhoods. Yeah, I have to.
Thank you, Dr. Salvo, for an excellent presentation. With much food for thought, I also want to thank, I would be remiss if I didn't, Megan Marin, my graduate assistant, who really brought this program together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was fabulous.